Joining me now to discuss it all is Alan Freeman. He's a former Globe and Mail journalist. He worked at the Department of Finance, and he's an honorary senior fellow at the University of Ottawa's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, one of the reasons we invited you in was 2 years ago for iPolitics. You wrote an article saying, an article on why Canada needs a common national security regulator, but also why Canada will never get one. Have you revised your opinion? Are we closer to getting a national security regulator?
I think that this ruling by the Supreme Court is actually very important, and it will get us closer. I think that this project now, with a unanimous ruling from the Supreme Court that says that the federal government's plan to have this cooperative approach to national securities regulator, it looks as if it will go ahead now.
You worked on this when you were at the finance department.
Oh, I worked on it as sort of on a communications end. I wasn't working on the, but I would guess they're breaking out the champagne at the finance department. They've been working on this for a good 10 years, seriously, since the Flaherty days.
Why is this important? Because this is a million-dollar question to our viewers. Why is a national securities regulator important to people?
Well, for example, for one thing, Canada is the only, I think it's the only G20 country that doesn't have a national securities regulator. So in other words, the U.S. has the Securities and Exchange Commission. So if there's a problem with the stock exchange, it is a national, there are national rulings that take place. It makes it more efficient for capital markets, in other words, to raise money for companies. It also, for investors, it gives more clarity. You don't have to go to your local securities commission if you're in a small province, which may be really overwhelmed by these issues. If you've got some problem with, a prospectus or, problems with,
dealing with things like fraud as well.
Right,
too, right?
Fraud, with stock market fraud. And right now it tends to be province by province, and God knows, we all know that money moves around internationally, and let alone province by province. So an insider trading scandal where somebody's in Ontario, somebody's in Quebec, somebody's in Alberta, and they're all sort of conniving together, you end up right now having to have 3 separate investigations by 3 separate securities commissions.
A lot of people say this saves money too. Why would it save money?
Well, for one thing, I mean, will the consumer save money? Perhaps eventually. But for example, right now, if a big issuer, say, a Bell Canada or a bank or whatever, or a mutual fund company wants to sell shares or, mutual fund units across the country in a national offering, they have to go and basically get their piece of paper, their prospectus, approved by 13 different commissions. So you have to go to a lawyer, you have to go get, pay a fee, whatever. It's sort of ridiculous. So this will mean that there'll be, for the members of this cooperative National Securities Commission, there'll be a one-stop shopping.
So what exactly is Ottawa proposing, or what was being fleshed out by Minister Flaherty, and now Minister Morneau has brought it over?
Right. So what this would mean, which is different, it won't be just federal legislation saying we are in charge of securities, because an earlier ruling of the Supreme Court of Canada said that actually securities under the federal constitution is provincial. So what this means that the provinces that participate will be able to pass legislation to say, we basically concur with the other provinces that are part of this national body, and basically we will sort of hand over jurisdiction over these issues to this national body, which will be, I think, jointly operated by the provinces that participate.
So it's sort of a uniform code of conduct and standard and an oversight body.
Right.
What about, I mean, we mentioned at the beginning, Alberta and Quebec, and especially Quebec has fought tooth and nail against this because they said it's an incursion into provincial jurisdiction.
Right. And Alberta was pretty adamant as well.
Yeah. What happens, is this Supreme Court ruling enough to ensure that this goes ahead, or can
I think so. I mean, I think that the federal government has decided, it always knew that Quebec would not be a voluntary participant. So I guess it's made that, political calculus that if it has, particularly Ontario, which is huge, most of the stock market activity in the country goes through the TSX, right? Okay. So that's like 70–80% of the whole shebang, right? So if those, and BC is on board too. So if those 2 big provinces go on, and I think right now it's 5 provinces and 1 territory that have already signed on. I would guess that with the Supreme Court ruling, others will sign on. Okay. If they don't, then I guess there will, I would think that there will be a sort of a modus vivendi over time. I'm not sure Quebec will sign on formally, but they will figure out a way of making this work for them as well. Because Quebec business, if it feels it's losing out, will, I'm sure, put pressure on the provincial government.
So you don't foresee the federal government having any further major obstacle. This will be a path
it's going to
ahead.
be, there'll be, this is Canada, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There will be federal, provincial
Negotiations,
complaints, tensions, but I think this is a big step forward. Remember, it's a unanimous ruling of the Supreme Court of Canada, so I think that's really important.
Okay, Alan Freeman, thank you very much for coming in to explain it.
Okay, it's a pleasure.